All right, this is the complicated part of today's lesson, this idea of the payment float. Okay, I will try to define this, but it's really going to be hard to define. The explanation, I think, is going to do a better job. But the payment float essentially refers to the idea that credit card purchases are always delayed. They allow you to essentially delay payments on purchases. All right, that's the first part of a payment float. If we want to think about how a payment float works, there's two components. One is you delay your purchases into the future. If I buy, like I did today, if I buy some food at Metropolis for 10 bucks with a credit card, I don't actually pay for that until the next month. So I've saved $10. I will still have to pay that money back in the future, but imagine if I took that $10 that I saved and invested it, okay? Over the long run, it's going to end up benefiting me tremendously. So, payment float, the first part is that you're going to delay payments. The second part is you used the freed up money freed up. It's not exactly a technical term, it'll do the trick. So you use the freed up money to increase investments. Okay? It's another one of these subtle ideas. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal, right? Like we saw in the last example with cash back. Getting $800 in cash back a year maybe doesn't seem like a big deal until you think long run and consider the time value of money. That's what you're going to see here as well. So let me give you an example. This is similar to the type of example you're going to see on the quiz. I'm going to give you guys some practice problems on the worksheet to help you work through this, because it is one of the more complicated ideas for this test. So let's imagine two people. Two people. Each spend $3,000 a month. One uses cash and one uses a credit card. Okay? They're spending the same amount of money. We're not even going to consider the idea of cash back. That's another benefit. We already saw how that works. Let's just focus our efforts on this payment float. Okay? So person one. This is the person with cash. Just kind of take this into the future and think about their spending. All right, every single month with cash, you make $3,000 in purchases, right? That's kind of how we're starting out our example here, is imagining they make $3,000 in purchasing. And of course, if you're using cash, every time you spend $1, you immediately bear the cost of that spending, right? So if you spend $3,000 today, you literally spend it today. So your purchases and your cost will be aligned. You might be wondering, where am I going with this? Well, with cash, it's not a very interesting example, is it? Every dollar spent is immediately spent. So over time, your purchases just kind of look like that, right? They just go into the future at a constant rate. Okay? Now let's think about what a credit card does, okay? Credit card is going to change things a bit. And I'm going to fudge the math here just a bit to keep things as simple as possible. I'm going to simplify. This is person 2. They're using a credit card. And let's think about them over this time period. They're going to make exactly the same purchases. So, right here, in July, they make $3,000 in purchases. But think about when they actually are going to be effectively paying for it. What a credit card does is it delays the purchases that you make. So if you buy something today for $100, it's probably going to be roughly a month before you actually really make the payments. So $3,000 of purchasing in July 2020 essentially gets shifted to the next month. And so your effective cost here is $3,000. And this is going to be continued on and on and on again. all the purchases that you make will be moved to the next month. Okay. All right, we're just moving these forward to the next month. Now, where does the benefit come in? Well, to try to make this example as clean as we possibly can, what's weird about this example mathematically is you got to kind of imagine it has an ending point just to give you something to solve. So let's just imagine that November 2020, they stopped making payments, okay? Just to make the math nice and simple. So November 2020, I don't know, they get hit by a train or something. They stop buying stuff. They go live off the grid. I don't know, okay? But let's just imagine they stop spending money just to give us a cutoff point to solve. So what that would mean is, in December, if you're using cash, well, the game would be over, right? You're making $3,000 in purchases every single month, and then boom, it comes to an end, okay? Compare that now to the person using the credit card. In that last month where they don't make any purchases, they would still need to make that last $3,000 purchase, all right? So the last $3,000 purchase would be attributed here. Now, you got to be real open-minded when you think about this, okay? But what effectively this person has done, if you think about it this way, is they've effectively pushed back this first $3,000 purchase all the way to here, right? Think about it. All these parts in the middle, using cash and using card, are identical, right? These months are exactly the same. It's the first and the last month where things are changed, okay? So what this effectively does, once all of the dust settles, it doesn't seem like this is happening while you're doing it, right? When you're making purchases, it doesn't seem like the purchases I'm making now will be pushed way into the future. But when you do the math, you'll see that these intermediate months cancel out. They end up being exactly the same cash versus credit. So what benefit it provides is your $3,000 purchase in July is effectively repaid in December. Right? I know what you're thinking. Wait. They really made the payment right here in August. Sure, they did. But think about what the math is showing us, okay? If you use cash or card, these months are still going to cancel out. They're exactly the same once you consider what really is happening, okay? The only differences are you save $3,000 here, you lose $3,000 there. So that's what we really care about, is the differences between using cash and a credit card, okay? So the benefit here is you've effectively created an interest-free loan. If you are always making your statement payments in full, credit cards do not charge you any interest, 99% of the time, okay? So for this person here, they push one payment back into the future over and over again, which effectively allows them to borrow $3,000 here, right? That's what borrowing is. When you're given money, you don't have to pay it back, okay? So it's like they borrow $3,000 here, and then they pay $3,000 here back on the back end. The reason this is advantageous is they could invest the $3,000 saved, okay? So they can invest the $3,000 saved, and let's just say, for example, that they get a 5% interest rate for these 5 months, all right? This is the $3,000 that they saved that they're going to get a 5% interest rate on compounded annually. And you'll see that this is going to generate a little bit of extra money for them. This comes out to about $3,061.61, okay? Now, where's that money coming from? Right here. If they use cash, they have to spend the $3,000 right away. But if they use card, that saves them $3,000 on the front end that they'll pay back on the back end. So effectively, they have 5 months where they borrowed the money before they have to pay it back. At that point, if they have saved that $3,000, they now have grown it to $3,061. So they've generated $61.61 of savings that they otherwise couldn't have if they were using cash. Hope I haven't lost you. Okay, that's the idea of a payment float. You're floating your payments 1 month into the future, and when all of the dust settles, what you recognize is you get an interest-free loan on the front end of that borrowing. Okay? So, $61, not much, right? Dave Ramsey would be out there right now saying, I can't believe all this work you're doing for $61. Well, in the long run, it's not $61. So let's do a second example here. All right, so example 2. Let's stick with the same basic idea, $3,000 a month in spending. But let's take this way into the future. Let's not think about how a credit card benefits you over a 5-month period, because 5 months is really not enough time. Personal finance is a lifelong idea. Let's instead think about what if you use credit cards over a 40-year period, right? You get your first card at 23. You use it instead of cash all the way until you're 62. You've got 40 years there of using a credit card instead of cash. Let's imagine that idea, all right? So specifically, let's think about it this way. It's July 2020. The person with cash makes $3,000 in purchases. The person immediately pays it off because that's how cash works, right? You pay for it as soon as you buy it. With credit cards, however, July 2020, you make $3,000 in purchases, but you do not pay for them now because it gets kicked forward 1 month into the future. All right? Take this way into the future. They're continuing to make $3,000 payments with cash. They're continuing to make $3,000 payments with their credit card. If we take this way into the future and then choose a place to stop, let's imagine that in June 2060, 40 years into the future, we make our last payments. Just to give us an end point. June 2060, as a credit card user, you just decide, I'm gonna stop using credit cards. And you're gonna add up all the benefits that you had, okay? That's what we're showing here. The benefits of using a credit card over a 40-year time period. If you invest the money that you saved, okay? So way off into the future here, again, looking at June 2060, the credit card purchaser makes their last purchase. It gets kicked into the future, and the game ends, right? The only differences here will be between these two people. They're both spending $3,000 a month, but for the credit card user, they don't spend that $3,000 in year 1. And for that credit card user, they pay it back in that last month, okay? So month 1, they save $3,000. And in the very final month, they pay an extra $3,000, right? All these payments are getting kicked forward into the future, okay? So what they're going to be able to do is invest $3,000, and we'll use 7% real interest, right? You might be wondering, well, shouldn't I worry about inflation? Well, let's put it all into real terms, right? Over time, inflation goes up by about 2% a year or so, all right? So let's just imagine that we're accounting for inflation in all these values. That's a reasonable thing to do. And so we'll use a 7% interest rate for our future value calculation because that's the expected annual return in real dollars, okay? So if I invest $3,000 at a 7% return, that means my future value comes out like this, all right? Just use annual compounding interest, 40 years at 7% interest. And let's see what this $3,000 that they saved becomes in the future. All right, so over 40 years, this becomes $44,923.37. Okay? So that's how much that money becomes. Now, you might be tempted to think that that's the end of the discussion, if I ask on the exam how much value you get out of the payment float in this example, you might put that as your answer. But remember, that's just how much your $3,000 has grown to, okay? You still have to take out this last $3,000 purchase, all right? You save $3,000 here, you invest it, it becomes worth $44,000, but you need to now take out the $3,000 in order to see what gains you generated. So I'm going to subtract out the $3,000 here, and this is the answer that I get. That's how much they save from the payment float if they take that full $3,000 that they saved in period 1, month 1, invest it, and then pay off their final debt using that investment. So for me, payment float alone is going to save me and you and consumers that, you know, spend $3,000 a month. I bet really you'll end up spending more than that, right? But for just people spending $3,000 a month, if they do the ideal thing and save the extra, invest it at 7% growth, that will net them $42,000 in savings just because of payment float, just because they can push their payments into the future. Basically, credit cards give you a 0% interest rate over the 1 month before they charge you your statement balance. So you're just effectively saving a little bit extra because every month you're getting a little extra time to pay it back. So to me, it's a big deal, right? Dave Ramsey would look at this and say, people who aren't good at personal finance are going to make mistakes. They're going to spend this money instead. Hell, they may spend $5,000 because they freak out when they get a credit card and go wild with it. Well, of course, anytime you make mistakes, you're screwed. What I'm saying is, figure out a way to use what's beneficial in a way that doesn't cause mistakes. So when you get your first credit card, that first month, you're going to have extra money in your account because you're not actually paying for things. Take the extra, throw it into the stock market, throw it into a Roth IRA, and see what you generate in the long run. That's the payment flow. Okay, to wrap up the benefits of credit cards, we're going to go through just 2 more pretty simple ideas. We went through the tricky ones already. The first was rewards. We talked about cashback rewards. We mentioned travel rewards. And we also discussed those minimum spend bonuses, right? Just potential ways to take advantage of credit cards. As we said before, if you're not responsible, if you don't know how to use a credit card correctly, it can be a complete disaster. It really can. But if you use it responsibly, it's not, okay? The payment float. This is the idea that basically credit cards give you a 0% loan every month. The payments I'm making today, I do not pay back until next month, right? So effectively, I get a 1 month, 0% interest loan. Over the lifetime of a person, that can be worth a lot of money. Okay, that was the payment float. 2 more ideas that I think really matter. The third is emergency borrowing. Normally, people would tell you, never use a credit card to pay for things when you don't have the money. That's probably pretty good advice for an average American, but we're not going to be average. We need to understand the potential benefits of this. Credit cards often offer low interest for an introductory period. So for example, they may offer 0% for 18 months. Okay? Obviously, credit cards have maximums in terms of how much you can spend on them. A lot of times it's $10,000, $5,000. It depends on your credit history and everything. I'm not going to get into great detail on that. But the bottom line is, if there was really an emergency, you can use your credit card to make payments. People look at that as terrible advice, okay? Because for the average person, it is terrible advice. The average person should have an emergency fund, right? And if they're ever going to make a payment, they should use their emergency fund. This is more Dave Ramsey stuff. Dave Ramsey would say, you know, have at least 3 or 4 months worth of expenses held in some sort of account, like a savings account, that you can pull from in case of an emergency. Well, I'm going to change that logic, okay? What I would basically say is, let's imagine you. Imagine you have $50,000 in a Roth IRA. And $30,000 can be withdrawn. We talked about this before with Roth IRAs, right? One nice thing about Roth IRAs is you can withdraw your contributions at any time but you can't withdraw your interest. This person is way more like you than the person who's going to put 3 or 4 months of emergency fund into a savings account. Putting 3 or 4 months in a savings account, not a terrible idea, but you should recognize that it's not ideal, is it? Because savings accounts on average offer very low returns, and they're not tax advantaged at all. Savings accounts profits are taxed as income, which is not good, okay? So instead, we would love to have our money in a Roth IRA, all right? $30,000 can be withdrawn, not bad. So let's say that your car breaks down, or pick your poison in terms of emergency. Your AC breaks, you get really sick, I don't know. But let's say your car breaks down and you have to spend $10,000 to buy a used car. This is where Dave Ramsey would suggest having your emergency fund come in handy. People often put themselves in a complete disaster. Like, you know, the typical American really doesn't save hardly anything. So like a typical American, they break their car, they're in a situation where they can't buy a car, so they miss work and then they get fired, or they use a credit card to make a $10,000 purchase and then they're in debt for the rest of their lives. That's a terrible thing, right? But let's think about it from a strategic standpoint. What if this happens while you have $50,000 in a Roth IRA? You could withdraw the $30,000 to buy this car, but really you would like to leave money in a Roth IRA, right? Roth IRAs are tax advantaged, so you prefer to leave the money in a Roth IRA. So what you do is you apply for a 0% credit card, okay? So this person gets a 0% credit card and gradually pays it back. Okay? Now, why is this not dangerous? For the typical American, this would be a very dangerous plan. But for you, it's not. Because if for whatever reason you're unable to pay all this back, you've got your Roth IRA sitting there waiting to be withdrawn from, right? Your emergency fund ends up being not a savings account. Instead, your emergency fund ends up being a credit card and a Roth IRA. You see what I'm saying here? The credit card becomes just a tool. It's not really for you to borrow money. It's just to avoid taking money out of your Roth IRA. You've got the money handy, but why withdraw from a Roth IRA when a credit card will just give you free money for 18 months? That's what I mean when I say that you can be responsible and use credit cards to your advantage. Everything that we've talked about so far in the hands of somebody who is incapable is a disaster. It's kind of like drugs, right? Basically, you can imagine 2 schools of thought. Drugs shouldn't exist at all, or drugs should be allowed. Well, if drugs were completely disallowed, some people would benefit from that, people who are addicts, right? But if you make some drugs allowed, people can use it responsibly. And I'm not necessarily talking about illegal drugs. I'm saying things like aspirin and Tylenol, right? These things are useful in the right hands. Credit cards are useful in the right hands as well. You just have to be responsible, okay? Understand your own personal finance situation. Understand what your Roth IRA does for you. You could have an HSA, same deal, right? You could use an HSA to pay for medical expenses in the case of an emergency. The benefits here are twofold. One, you get to use a credit card with a 0% interest, which is fantastic, right? Borrowing for free is a good deal. And two, you never have to put a bunch of money in a savings account because your Roth IRA is going to serve as your emergency fund, okay? So I wanted to introduce this now because I think this is where emergency funds, something we need to talk about, come into play. The Roth IRA is just so incredibly useful, and the credit card gives you a quicker way to spend money when you need to, all right? So benefits of credit cards, potentially. Maybe you don't use all of these. Maybe you avoid credit cards forever. Do whatever you want. But the bottom line is, if used responsibly, big values. You get rewards, you get a payment float, you get emergency borrowing, and there's a fourth one here. Sometimes people don't understand this. They can be used to increase your credit score. Yes, this is true. You may have been heard that if you open up credit cards, it hurts your credit score. Well, that's very much a simple way to think about things. No. In fact, for most people, credit scores are boosted by using a credit card. Again, it all comes down to how responsible and how active you are. For me, credit cards don't really help my score, to be honest. I have so many credit cards that kind of the benefits and the costs basically cancel each other out. But if somebody who doesn't have any credit cards gets a credit card and starts using it, that will almost always increase their credit score. So it's just more benefit, okay? Credit cards, the cost, debt, disaster are huge, but the benefits are also really big if you add them all up. The next videos, the next class, we're going to talk about these credit scores. So I'm just going to leave off now for the benefits, and we'll pick up here in the next class in regards to credit scores. To wrap things up, every time I go through one of these lessons on credit cards, invariably I get a bunch of students asking me about some good cards that they could use. If you're not interested in learning about more credit cards or credit cards that might be beneficial to you, you can shut the video off. You're not going to be tested on any of this material. But if you want to know about some credit cards that might be available to you, here are a few good examples. Now, by all means, do not go out and get a credit card because of this class. I'm always terrified that there's going to be some student who gets a credit card because of this class, goes into debt, and ruins their life. Please don't be that person. Know yourself, okay? I'm not encouraging you to get a credit card. I'm just telling you right now, if you do get a card, here are a few good options. There are hundreds of different varieties of cards out there. Here are just a few pretty good ones. This is the card that I see my students get most often. Sorry, my marker is drying up here. It is the Discover IT student card. This one is aimed directly at college students. I don't know exactly what the reason is there, but it's a pretty good card. It's nothing super special. But the thing about credit cards is, it's often hard to get a credit card when you don't already have one. Getting a credit card is based on your credit history. And a lot of times people go through college with maybe no debt or very little debt, and so their credit history is sparse. Credit card companies want to loan to somebody they think is going to pay them back. And if they don't know if you've ever borrowed money, they don't know if you're really going to ever pay them back. So cards like this are specifically aimed at college students. They usually have a low amount that you can borrow from them, but they still offer some rewards. So this Discover It Student Cashback Card offers 1% cashback on all spending, plus 5% back on specific spending categories. I have the non-student version of this card, and it's really nice because, for example, in the third quarter of every year, so that's like what? I guess in July, August, and September, I think. So July, August, and September, they give you 5% back on restaurants. I tend to spend a lot at restaurants, so I'm just getting a 5% savings. With the grown-up version of the card, they also give you, in your first year, they double it. So I got 10% cash back on all my restaurant spending in the third quarter. So these quarters all have different things. The last quarter is Amazon, and I save on my Christmas shopping. They do gas stations, one of the quarters, etc. So it's a nice card because you can get it. It's a card I think that if you watch this video, you probably would be able to get it. And also, in addition to these benefits, it has no annual fee. So this is going to be a nice card to get if you want to earn some cash back and you don't want a lot of frills. It's a nice, simple card. We're going to learn in the next video. You want to keep your first credit card forever because it starts your payment history, helps boost your credit score. So this is a really good one to start with, okay? Let's say instead of getting cash back, you have something very specific in mind. Let's say you want to fly to Europe. Well, there are credit cards for that. There's the AA Advantage. Boy, this one has a terrible name. If I worked for this company, I would go to the boss right now and say, why are we naming our credit cards all this crap? This is the card. This is another card that actually I have had. I don't have it anymore, but I canceled it because I'd already gotten the advantage out of it. It's the AA Advantage Aviator Red World Elite Mastercard. Terrible name, good credit card. This card does have a fee. It has specifically a $99 fee. So when you get this card, you're immediately going to pay a $99 fee, right? Which is not good. I don't like paying a $99 fee. But the benefit here is really big. This is a great card to get, use the benefit, and then cancel. The benefit of using this card is once you make just one purchase, this is the only card I know that gives you a minimum spend bonus on just anything. If you make one purchase, after one purchase, you get 60,000 AA points, whatever their mileage system is called. So it's essentially their frequent flyer points. Okay? And that 60,000 points is enough to get you to Europe and back. It's enough to go several places in the US back and forth, but I'll just give you an example of what happened to me. I got this card. My mom, I'd also talked her into getting this card, and my parents decided they were going to go to Germany. Well, she had the card. I had the card. I gifted the points to my dad. My mom and dad flew to Germany and back for free. It would have cost them each like $1,800, $2,000 to do that. That's huge savings, right? It's not trivial. It's a big deal to save $1,800 or $2,000. What Dave Ramsey would say is you're going to end up going to Germany when you wouldn't have otherwise and spend extra money. Well, in their case, they were going to go to Germany. I just saved them $4 grand, okay, by teaching them how to use these cards. So there are lots of cards like this, but this is the easiest one if you're just trying to make that one big trip. Next year, I'm hoping to go to Germany again. I'm going to try to get, or I'm sorry, not Germany. I'm hoping to go to Sweden. I'm going to try to get this card again. But once you've had it once, it's often harder to get it a second time. But man, what huge value, right? It saved a lot of money. I wish I'd known about this when I was in college. Could have done some cool trips. A third one here is the Chase Sapphire Preferred card. I will say off the bat, students who had trouble getting this card, I've had students come back and tell me they were not approved for this card. It is more aimed at people that have steady income, so this might be a card that's good to get later on in life. But this one gives you a $95 fee, which obviously we don't like. But on top of that, it gives you 60,000 points, essentially 2% cash back, and tons of other benefits. So if you're the type of person who's thinking, I would really just like to get one really good card and hold on to it, this is a nice card. These 60,000 points can be redeemed for $600. They can be redeemed for travel. The system is very complicated. You can move points from this system into other systems. You can convert them into Delta points and all kinds of other things. It's all very complex, but the benefits are really big. And they give a lot of ancillary benefits. For example, if you have this card and you use it to pay for rental insurance, or excuse me, if you have this card and you use it to pay for a rental car, the card provides free rental insurance. So you don't actually have to buy it, okay? You should look into that before you think about getting this card. You should look into all those details. I don't want to do it in this video because it's very lengthy, but this card would be a really good one to cover everything that you need, okay? So, all this said, there are tons of good cards out there. If you're interested, check out the Points Guide, great resource. Check out Reddit's Churning page, another fantastic resource. Go in there and learn. Spend several hours learning, because if you spend several hours learning and you're responsible, it will save you a tremendous amount of money. You'll go on more vacations, you'll have more fun, or you'll have more retirement savings, depending on what you want to do with it.